Hi everyone. Before we started this episode, I wanted to put this out here very quickly. A good friend of mine, Fred Eckroth, recently passed away, and the circumstances around his passing were quite sad and unfortunate. Um, in the link to this episode, wherever you're listening to it or watching it or whatever, there's a link to a GoFundMe to support his family. He has left behind a wife and son, and they need all the support you can give him right now. So please consider donating. He was a great guy. He was a great dad. He was a great friend. He was a great karate teacher, and he was gone way too soon. So if you can help out in any way, please do. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Karate Without Belts. I'm John, always joined, or mostly joined, sometimes joined, regularly joined by the illustrious Jeremy.
I don't know about that, but all right, whatever.
What?
Okay, yeah, I'm
I'm
here.
giving you. I'm
Uh,
giving you the illustrious. Why not?
uh,
Stupendous, the spectacular.
I don't know about that. I would say cooling off after my little tour of our power plant, but other than that, that's fine.
Jeremy's been doing essentially what's called lava training. Like he's been walking. He's been doing the stair climbs, not as fast as he used to, but uh the man's just getting on like all sorts of like bulletproof gear to take on like the wire demons that are plaguing his workplace. He's been talking to me about like basically it's like training doesn't happen anymore on the dojo floor. It's just a daily life for him. So
Yeah, as I was talking to John before we started, one of my adventures was going up to what's called the burner deck in our power plant, which it's usually between 150 and 180 degrees up there. And you're in full protective gear, flame retardant gear and all that kind of stuff, which is a good thing. But yeah, I mean, it gives a whole nother meaning at stress testing your body. I tell you that much. So yeah, I was lucky that day. It was about 150, 160 degrees instead of 180. But yeah, it was a little warm.
at 20 degrees does make all the difference. I think that would be like 80 Celsius or Fahrenheit, something.
Yeah, somewhere there. Yeah, no, I there for a minute I thought I was going to be like Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark at the very end, where everybody's melting. That's kind of what I was feeling like there for a while. I was like,
That's
holy cow.
only if you open the casket and or not, are not worthy. Or is it
Well,
if
if
you
I
look into it?
well,
Or you're a Nazi.
well, if I would have opened up one of those actual burners, it would have happened. But yeah, I'm not opening that. But anyway, that's beside the point. So
We've been looking at our output recently, and even though our last episode, I think we put it out less than a month ago, me and Jeremy kind of came to the point of thinking like, hey, it's been kind of a minute since we've talked about the podcast in general and kind of what's going on with it and what we're doing
well,
with
I
it.
think I
Are we
think also
alive? Are we not doing this? Are we just
yeah,
putting this out whenever we can? Because that's normally how we do it anyway. Um,
and I think to try to get back to the root of what the podcast really came about and what it's really about.
yeah.
So
It's one thing that I've struggled with in creating this. Been getting people on for it. When Jeremy quite graciously came on and was like, "Yo, I'll co-host," and the the whole idea behind doing a karate podcast, right? And so, in an effort to reintroduce, and in an effort to clarify, yo, so this is going to be how to do a karate podcast or clarification on what the hell we're about. So we both have, I think between, I've got about 20. I think Jeremy's got about 35 years on training.
Yeah, not quite 35, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think the general idea of anybody approaching this is that we have experience doing martial arts. We have experience with martial arts in many different places and specifically around karate. Always has been, kind of always will be. That's what this is always going to be about. It's always going to be about karate and martial arts in general, right? We've both had various different interactions with different martial arts, practiced some, integrated some of those things back into karate. Karate is, wide enough to absorb a lot of that. And that's where we come from. We don't really come from any other sort of perspective. Both come from an American perspective, but also heavily influenced by the Okinawan karate side of things. That I think gets the background out of the way. Jeremy is my senior in what we've practiced, or the system what we practiced, or what's left of it at least. I guess if we want to talk about it that in any sort of way.
Yeah.
This is one thing I always rail on. The idea of the quote unquote karate expert, like, Jaden Smith, apparently, Will Smith's son. We're as, I guess, expert as the next guy. We're only speaking from our own experience. We're only speaking from what we know and what we see, like anybody else who does anything.
Yeah. I think eventually, I mean, both John, myself, and others that we've talked to through, with or during the podcast, or, friends of ours that we've associated with, all of us have kind of run into some of these issues of kind of why even the podcast began, or the idea of the podcast began. And so I'll turn over to John, kind of let him describe kind of one of his, and we'll just kind of go back and forth on some things that kind of came up in our training, and it's like, that really doesn't, it's basically, we're just kind of looking at it from an outside the box view of, does that really matter? And who really gives a crap?
Well, yeah, and you buried the lead there, my friend. But this actually came about when you, because you're directly involved in this story.
Well, yeah. So
you are directly involved in this story. So let's not miss the last time. And I think we literally say the last time in both senses. We were both promoted, right? And so we're talking about this idea of belts and ranks and stuff we talked about before, right? But for those of you who are new, right, the last time this came up for either of us was you had been promoted and I had been you were put up to 5th,
yeah,
if I recall, and then I was put up to 3rd. And yeah, we're just gonna make that a plain in the text, right? So it's not a mystery to anybody. That's just what it was. And so it must have been like 3 years later, right? I think it was like 3 or 4 years later.
yeah, yeah.
It wasn't too long after. It was
Yeah, I think it was right at 3.
And you had said to me, this is when I was initially living in Japan, because when we do recordings is when we also, and we're actually gonna kind of try to get back to this, is we would do online Skype training and go over stuff and go through stuff. And it was one of those days, and I was in this year, I want you to test for 4th, or I think you should test for 4th. I'm going to put you up for 4th. And I was like, all due respect, love you to death, Jeremy, but nah, I'm good. And this and that come from like, it was one, a practical perspective, because I would have had to pay a lot of money to jump on an airplane, go to the United States, which is kind of weird thinking you're living in Japan, like why you couldn't get promoted. Japanese art in Japan, but that's kind of a different thing altogether. Go to the headquarters of where we were training at the time. Pay most likely would have been $600, let's say.
Yeah, some.
ballparking for, the stuff there just to get another piece of paper that other people we knew were getting didn't have the same level of dedication or knowledge or anything like that. And it was like, okay, there was kind of like a practical impediment, right? It's just
Mhm.
like the cost of international travel and of just doing the thing. This had also come off. I forget if this was before or after. I believe it was after, but this had also come off kind of a very tumultuous trip I had to steer in
Yeah,
Japan.
yeah. I remember it was all around that
Yeah,
time.
it was
It,
either
it,
before or after. It was like
yeah.
right after, right before. I think it was before, but if we're honest, and it was around all that, and then just kind of seeing like the rank come down and the person come out, like the karate person go down, and like of the other people who were involved, or the higher ranking people who were going on that trip, and um, you kind of see that, you see like who people are, and then you get back on the dojo floor with them, and what's generally what that's supposed to be in ideal circumstances, that you get to see who people are, and then you get back on the dojo floor with them. And this isn't always the case, but normally it's supposed to be more of a, oh, okay, team building, cohesion, we're all in this together sort of a deal. And the opposite effect happened with that. Genuine. It shook me to my core, man. Like, and it was a little while there where I was like, man, I just want to give up. But then it was like, if I give up, then I like just give up the whole thing. And call it sunk cost, call it whatever, but the idea like of karate, the things that I've learned from it and done with it were greater than A, that bad experience, but B, that rank.
Hmm.
Like, and all the things around that. So, okay, that was the big push for me to continue training, despite essentially disassociating and essentially, like, to a degree, just completely giving up the entire, you know, system of it. And, how little of a difference there is when you're like, oh, I'm in this association and I'm this rank and I'm a guy who's wearing shorts. Like, how it ain't that much of a difference once you start doing the katas and you start doing the techniques and stuff. There's I mean, you actually look at the stuff, there's no difference. So what does it matter?
Yeah. 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 Well, I'll go through one of my, probably the first time I was really awakened by it.
Oh, is this the Jeremy becomes woke?
No, absolutely not. Good
Is it belt
Lord.
woke?
Yeah, I got a story for you later, but we're not going to do it on the podcast. Anyway. So, anyway, in I had an instance at another organization I was part of, and it was maybe 2-3 years after I'd gotten my first degree black belt. Um, but I was lucky enough to have learned some rare things, and I was very fortunate, very very blessed that I, to this day I don't even know how I fell into it. I was just thankful. And one day, another guy, nice guy, I have the utmost respect for the guy. I mean, I won't name who it is, all that kind of stuff. He comes up to, I mean, very, very, very high ranking. I mean, he was like seventh or eighth dan, you know, and he's coming up to me asking me to show him some of the stuff. And it kind of blew my mind because it's kind of like, I mean, I was very humbled that he was willing to learn from me, and I took that as, you know, quite an honor. just he'd even come ask me. But I really didn't. It was such a rank difference. It made me feel very uncomfortable at the time. But I realized at that point, it's like, well, wait a minute. You know, once with what we're doing, once you hit this certain rank, it's mainly just years of practice as far as your actual rank. It may not even be knowledge. It may not even be total skill. It just gets down to the point of years of practice. And it's like,
or like years of service in an organization. Like if you
yeah,
think of
I
it
mean,
that way.
it was almost kind of like I'm not putting anything off. I mean, not, it was almost like a union kind of setup.
Mm.
After so many years, it just felt kind of like that. And I'm not putting anything down on anybody. I mean, and let me tell you something. I mean, this guy had great skill. He just didn't have
A particular
this.
thing.
Yeah, this particular thing. I mean, it was one of those things. I'm like, shouldn't somebody a little bit, close? I mean, it was just one of those things. I just felt very, very uncomfortable. And I mean, probably if I hadn't seen him in years, but I mean, probably if we ran into each other, I mean, we'd be really cool. But it just made me feel a little uncomfortable. But it really woke me up about that. Is like, okay, if I'm first on, why should I pay for second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on? Why should I pay this money for a piece of paper if I'm not going to learn anything different? Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm thankful and have been blessed with people promoting me or advancing my rank or whatever. But in the long run, the bottom line is I can do what I can do, and that's the bottom line. I mean, I don't know everything. I don't want to know everything. I really don't. I'm content with what I know. There are certain times I do want to learn a few things here, a few things there. I think it would help me out. But as far as I've got a drive for a belt, I don't. It's like, that'd be kind of cool if I learned, something with this or something with that. That's more where I'm at now. And I don't need rank. I don't want it. I don't care anymore. I really don't. And it was interesting. I had somebody at my kids' karate class ask me the other day, it's like, what rank are you? And it's really funny. It was I know they were sincere and they were just asking, just as a personal question, But it was funny. It really made me feel very uncomfortable. It was like I really don't want to tell you because it's kind of like I really don't care about rank anymore. I really don't.
And this is kind of like goes to the whole thing of the podcast where it's like, if we just stop caring about this, like, will it go away? Is it the overriding aesthetic that is a part of most, if not all, martial arts these days, of some sort of traditional Japanese variety, despite the fact that karate is an Okinawan art? Yeah, we can't avoid that. It's kind of there, right? But if we tell ourselves, and you and me feel uncomfortable talking about it because we don't really view it as anything really all that meaningful.
Right.
But we also live in a world where people view that as something meaningful.
Right.
Right? So how do you deal with that being in that position? It's almost like having to like continuously telling the like political lie in order to maintain power or whatever. But then at the end of the day, people will just like, what if you answer the question, be like, oh, I'm fifth down. It's like, oh, really? Okay. And the conversation kind of continues, or like walks on. Person forgets or whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm more interested. Okay, you're fifth on, then what in the hell do you know? What do you really know? Do you actually understand what you're? Do you actually understand what you're doing, or is it just something that you're checking a checklist and yay, I got rank. Don't care. It's to me it doesn't matter. I mean, I've seen I've seen people get promoted to a Don rank that I would have a problem promoting to an intermediate belt.
Yeah.
And then I've seen people who've been promoted to a Don or to pre-Don rank that's like, Jimmy Christmas. I'd probably promote the person right here, from that standpoint, as far as skill level, I've seen, I think it gets back to, what we just said. It's like, I don't care what rank I am. I don't care what rank anybody really is. Oh, so and so's this. I don't care. I mean, good for them. I mean, if that's what their life's ambition is, awesome. But what did they really learn? What do they really know?
And the sad part is, this thing is supposed to represent that, and we all know it very clearly doesn't. And
No.
because, especially where we're at, it's kind of a echo of a time that's long gone by.
Yeah.
That's long passed by, from a tradition that's long, like, very, very well shown. A money thing. This was B, like a stature, a station thing. This was a class thing, in every regard, right? And yet, all of Okinawan karate, all of Okinawan martial arts has essentially had this like thrust upon it because of its inclusion in this.
Yeah, and it's funny, because I'm gonna give it a little plug. The new season of Cobra Kai is out, but it brings into light that
Which
one
we
part.
may or may not do an episode by episode breakdown on,
I don't know.
pending Jeremy's approval.
Don't
It will
know.
be a hate watch for me. It will be a maybe hate watch for Jeremy.
Whatever.
I needed alcohol to get through season 4, dude. I can't drink until November, so
I don't know. I mean, anyway, I'm not going to get into that.
right.
But it goes back to like the original Karate Kid. They're getting ready to do the tournament, and they're signing up for the tournament, and it's like, what rank is he? And Miyagi-san says, why matter? There you go. Why does it matter?
Then he goes and steals a black belt from somebody else. Like any good Okinawan martial artist. How is the black belt cut? Oh, he just ripped it off somebody else. That's a great representation of how history kind of went.
I mean,
showed up at the tournament. Wait, what's this thing? Oh, right. Yoink. Yeah, it's a black belt.
Whatever. I mean, that pretty much signifies kind of what we're really about. It's like, who gives a crap? I mean, who cares what rank anybody is, as opposed to, it should be more about what you know, what you can teach, and what you can share.
Coming up on almost 4 years of the podcast, I think, or 3. I'm an English teacher, not a math teacher. I don't know. 19, 20, 21. Yeah, we're almost 4 years in. Jeremy's walking away from me because he's got a math degree, and I can't even remember how long I've been. This is what's kept me going with this for about 4 years, despite this year kind of being a lull. Is that there's more interesting things in and around. There's more interesting things in and around martial arts. There's more interesting things in and around training. There's more interesting things from every sort of perspective, right? Social media, how it's portrayed in film, how people train, why people train, where people train, who people trained with, the history behind it, the future of it, right? The relationships involved in it. Like, all of these things are much more interesting than this unfortunate aesthetic, this unfortunate, like, happenstance of a thing that you and me both love.
Yeah, and what are the lessons behind all this stuff?
Right.
Not just, hey, I learned this kata, I learned this kata, I learned this kata. Great. What lesson did you learn while you were learning it? I mean, like, I'll never forget one of the lessons I learned. I guess I was really trying to push to get to black belt, and I was picking up things very, very quickly. And so one of the last katas before you tested for black belt, I remember, man, I tried to speed it up as much as possible. I was watching anybody who was doing the kata, and I was picking it up almost on sight. And I remember it really irritated Robbie, because he was like, no, I really wanted to spend time with you on this, but you decided to just go ahead and try to learn it on your own. He goes, and it's not a bad thing that you did that, but there were certain things I wanted to teach you with this. So in that aspect, I guess I got a different perspective of patience.
And then it's like, what would have been more important, getting to that point, right? We're ready to test for black belt, or building that relationship with one of your mentors, with one of the people who's been there for you, who's had that. Yeah, and I think this is kind of the overarching theme of the podcast to a degree, is that it's got to be it's that relationship with those people you're with. That's so much more important than this artificial thing for some inflated purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has no real meaning outside of where you stand in a row.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
of what imaginary people. And then like ultimately the dojo is about the people who are in it, and about who's training, and about why you're there and who you're with. Right. So
I mean, you can go to several places to go learn, fine art of whoop ass, but it's kind of like, what are you really getting out of it? What is it that you're really getting out of it? I mean, is it that skill and that's the only thing you're looking for? Or is it actually some lesson lifelong that you can pass down to generation after generation? If you're copying someone else's technique, it's not your own. If you're copying somebody else's lessons, it's not your own until you make it your own.
Which is why I think like ultimately karate is a mile long and an inch thick, but it's only deeper with those you're around. And this is why this whole new age of attempting to, I'm not saying this is about like online teaching and all, but attempting to just have digital dojos and stuff like that, which is, I mean, something we've done to a degree, but in a much different, like there's been a need to eventually get on the floor. Nowadays, people are just trying to learn things from YouTube and stuff, which bad, good, whatever it is. But like ultimately, if you're not on the floor with people, you're not learning those things with people and not having those interactions. It's only going to be so far for so much.
You're not learning the whole lesson. You maybe learn parts. It's incomplete. It's kind of like I tell people, my degree's in mathematics, but I really didn't truly learn mathematics until I was trying to get a physics degree. Funny thing is, I got one class left to finish a physics degree. I don't know if I'll ever get it, but whatever.
Physics without degrees. That's a side podcast.
But I mean, the point is, sometimes you think something's just a thing, but it's not always that thing. Like, I guess, I'm not going to call this person out, but one of my students, I remember he had just an absolute infatuation to learn Aiku. I mean, like, that's the weapon I want to learn. He had barely known bow. He barely knew the basics of bow. But he wants to go learn an advanced weapon. I told him, you need to learn this first. You need to learn this first. And time came, and he just totally did not listen to me. He just did his own thing, and it really created a problem. And what's interesting is, for the longest time, even after he learned it from someone else, which I had advanced knowledge of that at the time, it was like I would continue, when he was working with it, I was continually trying to correct him. And if he would have listened to me, it would have, it would have been a lot more natural. And so I know we're kind of going off script, but it is those kind of lessons. It is those kind of lessons that you get. And I mean, I think I would have been better off. He would have been better off if he would have listened to me, did what I told him, and kind of mentor him that way, as opposed to just jump right in.
Well,
And
especially
you
after
couldn't tell him anything different. And so, and I think that was one of the things that really drove a wedge between us. I mean, I feel bad, but that was his choice.
Well, and I think that this is the thing where it's like, especially when it comes to stuff like this, you had recommended me for that fourth degree. What if it had been the other way around, where I was like, Jeremy, I want the fourth degree. Jeremy, I want the fourth degree. When can I get the fourth degree? You're going to recommend me for the fourth degree now? Like, if I had done that, right, that would have like completely changed the tenor of the relationship,
Yeah.
right? And of a student attempting to dictate something. And anytime you become a student, and anytime you want to become teachable, you ultimately can't. You can ask questions, but you can't ask for things. Like, not you can't request to say, I want to learn this one thing. You can now, and that's, you can, but I mean, if somebody says not yet, or you're not ready, or gives you a decent reason for it. I think in that particular situation, though, you were kind of not going to be at a loss either way, because of just how how much they were trying to make things accessible, and you weren't really able to control that situation entirely.
And then the other thing was it became very difficult to teach them, because it was like, well, so-and-so said this. And that's a whole nother subject. But, I mean, the main point is, it's like, these are the lessons that aren't taught when you're just learning stuff.
Yeah. And like, this is why we're kind of the anti stuff, but like anti stuff. People have criticized us and been like, well, why this is just an audio program. Like, yeah, it's a podcast. But you want us to like, you want to see the video version of this, where it's just me sitting in a chair and Jeremy standing like in his dojo? Like, we've done maybe one video of us like demonstrating a thing, and that was but that's what we're not here to do, really. Like, maybe a little bit here, maybe a little bit there, but I mean, training's training. And like, they discussed this with other people. It's like, how boring is it just to watch somebody do a kata? Or like ultimately, like the point of that is just like, hey, that was good, that was bad, that was okay. Like unless you're in the know of something.
Right. So, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's pretty much my take on it. But I'll never forget the time when I was teaching many black belts, just the very first kata. We're just going through it. And what was funny is, one of the guy's kids, who was a beginner, he had just learned that first kata, which for us is Nachi Shodan. And what was funny is, every single person in that room that I was working with was not getting it. The only person that was getting it right was the kid's son, who wasn't even a black belt. And that's the kind of stuff that used to infuriate me. And I'm like, how is it that this person's doing it right, and all you guys who are supposed to be leaders are not?
The Chiefs versus, or the leaders versus followers issue.
Yes.
There's a podcast.
Too many chiefs and not enough people on the floor.
Yeah, and like, and this is kind of the point where it's like, when you're worried about the pecking order, you're not worried about the actual thing. Actual thing. Yeah.
And you're not really worried about training, real training. Not, hey, this looks good. Hey, this looks good. No, that's not what it's about.
No, sir.
I remember one instructor basically says, you want pretty? Go down the street. They got nice, pretty geese. Different colors and everything. Don't care about pretty. Care about if it works.
It can be pretty and work.
Huh?
It can be pretty and work, but it should work.
I mean, it's pretty awesome whenever you knock someone out. But anyway, that's beside the point. Sorry.
No, it is pretty awesome. You can also make sure that you have insurance, but that's a different story altogether.
Yeah, especially now. But anyway. So.
I think that helps kind of get us back on track and where we're going.
I agree.
It can be a little daunting to kind of try to do this on a regular basis, and because of work and things and life and things, you can get off track from doing something essentially just out of the passion of it. And I think coming back to center, even on a podcast, is important. And that's the purpose of this episode. Jeremy, what are you up to this week in terms of training? Are you going to be Are you going to be going to the ice tundra next?
No, I won't be doing that. All I know is I know I'm working a ton right now, but I mean, I'm trying to do stuff with my son in his karate class, so it kind of keeps me still going and stuff. And been working. Some of the other people in there kind of like, what are they doing? Because I'll be working with him with sticky hands kind of drills and things like that. So that's helped him on some stuff. So, but I know this is a shocker for everyone on the podcast. Most people know that I hate Kama, and I bought a new pair of Kama. So it's like I'm actually wanting to work with them because actually they feel better in my hands than the ones I've been using for 30 years. So I'm like, maybe that was the turning point. Maybe
you just needed the right Kama.
That was the one thing I always try to do is I always, like all my weapons, I tried to always make sure they were balanced almost perfectly for me. Because it's training equipment. Now, does that hurt me if I pick up a stick? Some way yes, and some way no. But I mean, the way no is I can find the balance on even a stick, to make it work. I know what it's supposed to feel like balance wise. So, and that's why I did that. I forgot who told me that. It had to have been Robbie, maybe Vicky, one of two, maybe even Vicky's mom. I can't, Dolores. I can't remember. But yeah,
Gotta remember, not everybody knows who these characters are.
One of them told me it was like when you're training with weapons, you should always have, if you're really seriously training with them, you should have balanced weapons because then you can find balance in anything you pick up. And I'm like, okay, you'll know what it's supposed to feel like. Sorry, I didn't mean to kind of squirrel.
No, it's okay. Did you get that email that I sent you right before we started training? Or not training? Right before we
started training? I saw it real quick. I saw it. I didn't get to really open it up too much, but.
Oh, okay. Because that has everything to do what you talked about. But that's a bit on the DL for now.
I got you.
Well, I'll maybe let that rip when I get approval from it. I've been training a lot more recently, but it also means apparently my Achilles tendonitis is just like, hey, hi, remember me? I'm okay with it, like it's all right, but it's just all right. I got I think I've almost got a bag constructed, and I got a new friend, Bob, which is what I'm calling my steel mace. So.
Nice.
Yeah, I just did a visual show for Jeremy, and I just realized we're doing an audio recording, so that little pause there is going to have to get edited out. So, all sorts of fun with that due to our friend Sal. But yeah, that's we're working on it recently. Last little bit, I'm going to put something in front of the episode too about this. A friend of mine, Jeremy doesn't really know him. A friend of mine, Fred Eckroth, last Friday, September 2nd, had very suddenly and very shockingly passed away. He ran a dojo in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, or close to there. And it's a big shock just to everybody's students, that whole community there, especially to his family. He had a wife and son who's got some challenges. So in the description, there's a GoFundMe to help out his family, and anybody who can support at this time for that, any amount helps. But they're just really struggling right now. So I'm going to plug that here right at the end. I'm going to throw something right in the beginning. If you're listening to this episode, it's the second time you're hearing this. So, but I don't want to bring this episode on a low point, but I do need to bring that up. So please contribute to that GoFundMe if you can. Any little bit helps. Cool. We're back, and hopefully we can stay back for a little while. But Jeremy, thank you as always.
All
You kind of
right,
saved the pot. I gotta say this here. You gotta help save us a little, because otherwise it's just been me like chasing people for interviews, which is not what I wanted to do. So thanks again. Thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, everybody keep on training. Like written bits we do, like, you know.
What happened?
Like, can you hear me?
What happened?
Can you hear me?
Hear you. Hold on.
I can't see you anymore. Oh God.
Yeah, yep,
I've gone blind.
There we go. Okay. Here it's back up.
That's what I get for trying to do an opening bit, like any sort, like before recording starts, and then I just leave it in, and then I throw the theme in front of it or behind it, and then we start the episode.
Oh.
Because who doesn't like, formulas?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Go ahead. Let's do it.
Yeah. So